Welcome to Money and Freedom, the podcast where you learn to become financially free using value investing. So, just catching up a little bit, in the last podcast, I explained to you through my own story why it's so important to invest, why it's so important to become financially free. This time, I'm going to explain to you why you should be investing like a value investor. I'll explain to you also what it is. But firstly, let's talk a little bit about the name of this podcast. I thought a lot about this name. I asked an AI, what should I call my podcast? That's about becoming financially free through value investing, through stock market investing. I asked a lot of my followers, what should I call it? Now, I already have a name for my blog. It's called Money and Freedom. And I thought a lot about that name. So why do we actually invest? It's about money, of course, but it's not just about money. It's about the life that we can create with the money that we invest, the money that will hopefully multiply and become more money. But what is money really about? Money is just a number. It's something you have on your bank, on the bank account. But it's how we live our lives. It's what we can do with the money. And I want to talk a little bit about freedom. And when I've done that, I will tell you about value investing, why I think value investing is the best vehicle. Okay, last time I told you about the story, how I got fired while on maternity leave. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the life I had before that. I was working as a journalist, and in many ways, it was a super fun life. I got to interview a lot of fun people. I worked together with very interesting people as well, intelligent people, dedicated people. I felt I had so much power in this position. You know, you write a story, it becomes headline, it's rolling on other news channels, maybe on the radio, you hear your own story getting repeated. It was super fun. I was very, very privileged. But there was a price associated with this kind of living. And maybe this had to do with a particular editor I had and his style of leading. But there were a lot of times where I could not do whatever I wanted to do. I could not live the life that I wanted to live. In particular, in very specific moments in my life, there was a very high cost associated with it. So let's see. First of all, let's see, there's an example here, very specifically. I remember I had invited a lot of guests for a birthday dinner. And all of a sudden, on this day, during the afternoon, my boss told me I had to go cover a conference. It was a late afternoon conference, and I knew, well, first I have to get there, I have to sit. It was like an after workday conference. I'll stay there, and then I have to come back and write the story. So I would be finished around 8 probably. And I knew, well, I can't cook. You know, I'd planned, I'd shopped for these things. And I told him, well, I've invited for a dinner. He said, buy them pizza on my birthday. Well, I did whatever I was told. Next day, the story was on the third section of the paper on page, I think, 14. That was a shame. But that's just like a normal day thing where you can't do whatever you want. There were bigger things at play. At some point, my mom had a stroke. She had a stroke. She wasn't able to speak. She could mumble. She couldn't eat, so she was being fed through these machines. One day at the hospital, the doctor said that they believed she didn't want to live anymore. And I had to figure this situation out. So I came after work and tried to interview her. Now, I have brothers and sisters, and they were super upset about this situation. And I'm a little bit more like factual in these kind of situations. So I told her, Mom, I'm going to interview you. I know, obviously you can't speak, but you can nod your head, you can shake your head. So I'm going to ask you odd questions. And the doctors have said this thing, that you don't want to be on the machines anymore and you don't want to have a particular operation. And I want to make sure that you really understand what that means. So I interviewed my own mom. And I asked her a question like, is the sun shining today? She was next to a window, so she could answer. And in the end, I asked her, do you want to have the operation? If she didn't have the operation, it meant they would turn off these machines that were feeding her. And I asked her, do you understand that it means you're going to die? And I think the doctors were right. She did not want to be in this situation anymore. She had been living like this, not able to move, not able to speak for months at this point. So they turned off the machines, and that meant she had 1 week left, more or less. And we were trying to feed her with a spoon. It was completely impossible. In this time, I had to go back to work every day. I could stay a little bit, and then I have to go back. I did not have the freedom to stay with my mom for that last week that she was alive. I regret that to this day. Now, there were other situations like this where I did not have the freedom in very important moments of my life. You know, I had a kid, and I had certain shifts at the newspaper. Every day I had to be there at 8 o'clock. Now, this meant when my first child was very young that I had to bring him to the daycare before he was even awake. And I had to make them give him breakfast because, you know, obviously I had to leave before 8 o'clock, you know. So we were leaving at around 6:30 to go to the daycare. And I was not, in theory, I could get off before the other journalists, but very often I didn't because that's how it works at a newsroom. So I was not back at the daycare before 4:30, even 5 o'clock when they were closing. It was a very, very long day for a small kid. And I did not have the freedom to choose at that point in my life because I was dependent on a salary. So that is the reason I want to call this podcast Money and Freedom. Freedom is enormously important. So enough about me and enough about the story that motivated me to become financially free. So the other thing is, how do you become financially free? There are several ways that you can take. One thing that's very important is you need assets. You need assets that can make your money work for you. Now, stocks are not the only assets out there. There are other things, like you could invest in bonds, for example. And bonds theoretically could be a good investment if the interest rate was at a higher level. Then you have real estate. You could invest in real estate. And I say, yeah, but there's just a lot of work with real estate. You have to make sure it's working. Maybe you can hire someone to manage it for you. But real estate is a physical thing. And you know what? No, it cannot compete with stocks because stocks you can do at home. You can sit in your kitchen. You can invest. Another thing I really love about stock is there's a level playing field. Stocks do not care where you are physically. Stocks do not care if you're black, white, yellow. Stocks do not care if you're a woman or a man. And a great thing about stocks, when you are a mother with small children and you're stuck at home, is the first thing I said is you can do it from home. That's a wonderful thing. Okay, so when you're investing in stocks, you can do it in many different ways. And I really believe in value investing, and I'll tell you why. There are several ways to invest in stocks. One very popular way is passive investing in indices, ETFs, you can also call it. There's a huge problem with this way of investing. And the problem is, what if you have a stock market bubble? And they exist, and we're probably in one right now. Let's go back to 1929. There was a huge stock market bubble. Stocks fell 80, 90% over a couple of years, and people were completely wiped out. It was a huge thing. We know that today. When stocks fall that much, and if you go back, if you take Dow Jones and look at how it actually developed, it took, now hold on to your chair, it took 29 years before Dow Jones got up to the same level. That means if we are in a major stock market bubble right now, and you are investing passively in funds, you might have to wait 29 years before whatever you have invested right now will be worth the same. That's a long time. Let's just talk a little bit more about comparing today's market with 1929. If you take something like Schiller's PE ratio, this is a way where you can measure how expensive the stock market is. PE, that's just price versus earnings, where you look at how expensive are stocks compared with what they earn. Very simple thing. And Schiller's PE ratio takes the market and measures that. Back in 1929, it was at level 30. Today, it's around 37, 38 at the moment of speaking. So stocks are very expensive right now. And that's a major problem with investing passively. Back in 1929, now that's a long way ago, that's a long time ago, almost 100 years ago. I get that. But this can happen again, and we've had other bubbles. Back in 29, an investor called Ben Graham, he lost a lot of money too, and he thought, there must be a smarter way to invest. This cannot be. He started writing about how you could invest in another way, and he was the forefather of value investing. He invented value investing. What he did was he gave us some methods to calculate what a company is worth. And then he talked about a very important concept called margin of safety. So let's say you calculate that a company, I'm just going to say some random number here, that a company is worth 100 million. Okay, so you know what it's worth. It's like the sticker price of the company. And then you look at the stock. You can see, okay, so the stock is saying it's worth 200 million. Well, in that case, you won't invest. Now, the stock market is super volatile. It goes up, it goes down. And even for a specific company, the stock will go up and down over a year. If you look at any chart, any company, it will go up and down. That's just how it works. Let's say that the stock price goes down to 50 million for a company that's worth 100 million. Well, now it's a good time to invest. That's what margin of safety is. It's the difference between what the stock price and the value of the company is. Margin of safety. It's a very important concept. When you invest that way, you're less likely to lose a lot of money. I'll get back to 3 reasons why, I'll sum it up, 3 reasons why value investing is better. But I just have to explain another concept to you. Different schools of investing. So a very dominant way of investing believes that the market is efficient. It's called the efficient market theory. And we have to talk a little bit about whether the stock market is efficient or not. Is it really efficient? If you think about it, I mean, just use common sense of logic and just take any chart. You could take any chart. You can take the Dow Jones, look at it. That's the oldest index we have, so it will take you way back to before 1929. And look at how it looks. It doesn't look efficient to me. And if you just think about what we know about history, the dot-com bubble, was that efficient? I don't think so. The financial crisis, was that efficient? Not very much, not really. 1929, was that efficient? Of course not. We know that. We know that crazy things happen. So is the market efficient? Is the stock market efficient? It's not efficient. And that is the difference between investing passively or investing like a value investor. That's basically the core of it. And you have to make up your mind if you believe the market is efficient or not. Do you believe the market is efficient? I don't. And that's why I believe in value investing. Okay, let's get down to 3 specific reasons why you should choose value investing. The first one is that you'll get a better average return. I'm not saying that you'll never have a negative return, that you won't have a down year. Of course you will. But average over many years, you'll have a much better return if you do it right, of course. I can't promise you anything specific, but if you do it right, if you take the time to pick these companies, if you take them through a checklist, if you calculate what they're worth, if you look at everything, is it a good product? Is it a good leadership? What's the company worth versus the stock price? If you do it right, you'll get a really good average return. If you want to look a little bit into this way of thinking, I suggest that you read an essay by Warren Buffett that's called The Super Investors of Graham and Doddsville. And somewhere below, wherever you're watching this from or listening to it from, I'll put a link to it. The main idea of this essay is that Buffett describes how several investors, including himself, investors like Walter Schloss and Tom Knapp and others, how they had really good returns over many years. And it's an argument against the idea that the market is efficient. It's an argument against another line of argumentation that says, well, these investors that do so well, like Warren Buffett, it's just a coincidence. The efficient market hypothesis people, they say that, well, it's just like, if you take a group of monkeys and you give them a coin and they'll toss that coin, some of them will eventually get lucky and win. So Warren Buffett took a group of investors, went through the return that they had over many years and looked at how did they actually invest. And they were all value investors. That's why he called it the super investors of Graham and Doddsville. So Graham refers to Ben Graham. If you're looking at the video, you can see one of the books here. The very famous book, The Intelligent Investor, he's called Benjamin Graham. There was another book called Securities Analysis that Ben Graham wrote together with David Dodd. So Graham and Doddsville, that's Ben Graham and David Dodd. What he proved in that very important essay is that it is possible to get a better return. It's worth a read. I'll link to it. The second reason why you should invest like a value investor is that you will feel more secure in a market crash. Well, your return might be down that particular year, but you know what you're invested in. You took the company through a checklist. You looked at the product. You looked at how much debt they had. I just said checklist, and we'll get back to what your checklist should contain. I'll get back to a checklist next time. I'll take you through one. I'll take you through my checklist. But because you look at the company carefully, you know what you're invested in. And some of these points on the checklist, we make sure that we're not investing in something that could go bankrupt. Actually, you want to only feel more secure. You will have fun, because when the market is down, that's when we really start hunting for good investments. You will feel like a dog that's been unchained, and now you can go. That's how it feels. It's a lot of fun to invest during a market crash. I mean, that sounds kind of awful. I know it sounds like we're the hunters in a crisis. It feels like we're the undertakers when people are dying, but it's not really like that. That's not how I look at it. I look at it like we are the security net, actually, in the market. When everything is crashing, we catch it. That's how I look at it. The third reason is ethical. If you're investing with the passive investing style, you actually don't know how you're investing. I mean, you know how you're investing, but you don't know what you're really invested in. Some of these indices have thousands of companies in them. When you're investing that way, it's like going into the supermarket and saying, I will take everything on that aisle, or I will take everything that has a green label. You don't know what it is. You don't know if it's toxic or if it's got sugar in it or whatever. And that's one thing I find a little bit amusing. You will have people who are so conscious about what they put on the dinner table. It has to be organic. It has to be it has to be locally produced, it has to be this and that. But when they're investing, they are not very critical. But when you are investing this way, taking a company through a checklist, knowing that what they produce, knowing who the management is, you are investing in a way that matches a very conscious way of consuming. if you compare it to going to the supermarket again. You take the product, you turn it over, you look at what's in it, and it's the only good way to invest. In fact, we should be proud of what we invest in, because the money we leave out there, they leave a trace on the world. They leave a footprint on the world as well. It's not just what we buy with our money, it's also what we invest in. It's super important. So when you are choosing something so carefully, you know what you're getting. You know what you stand for. Those are the 3 main reasons why you should be investing like a value investor. Very important reason, all of them. Now, next time I'll take you through my checklist. That's a fun thing to do, and it's very, very valuable, so I hope you'll listen in next time. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, follow, and review it on your favorite platform. It really helps the podcast grow. If you have any questions, feel free to write me at X. My handle is my first name, Beile, spelled B-E-I-L-E.